everybody. We're here at the Lincoln County Warrior Exhibit, and today we have Linda Williams with us. And tell us who we have today.
Today, Don, we have Mr. Frank Adderton. Mr. Frank is 93 years old, and he is a Korean Air Force veteran. And we are thrilled to have you today, Mr. Frank.
Tell us your story.
I attended pharmacy college in 1949, and I was ready for graduation in 53. And I was going to be drafted, so in April 53, I went to the Army and requested that I be given a position in pharmacy, and they said they couldn't do that. So they told me to go to the Air Force and they would do it. I went to the Air Force and they promised me. So I entered the Air Force August 4th, 1953 as a recruit. Did basic training, and then was assigned to the hospital. This training was at Sampson Air Force Base in Geneva, New York. I was assigned to the hospital there, and while there, 4 months later, there was a request for Air Force officers with a medical pharmacy and medical background. So I applied and received notice that I had been chosen out of 200 applicants to be given a commission. I was immediately sent to Montgomery, Alabama to learn how to be a medical supply officer. You get a drink. And after 4 months of training there, they asked me where I wanted to go, and they had 3 choices, so I chose Germany, Germany, Germany. Well, they sent me to Korea.
Oh, my goodness.
And I arrived there 1 year to the day the war ended. And so I was in charge of medical supply and the ambulance service and all the medical in the field hospital. And after 4 months, they closed the base and we moved to Miho, Japan, where I was also the medical supply officer and the hospital administrator if they needed me, but I wasn't needed for that there. We were required to have the troops do exercise twice a week, and we went to Mount Dyson, and they skied at Mount Dyson. 6 months later, they closed that base, and we moved to, the troops there all went back to the States, but I was sent to Tommy Air Base in Osaka, Japan, which was a great assignment. I couldn't have asked for a better assignment. And while there, I was chosen by 5th Air Force headquarters to set up a field hospital in Nagoya, Japan, for a 13-nation Asian conference, medical conference. I received a commendation from General Nice for serving there, and he said I was a credit to the Air Force for my experience with this. Then it was time to return to the States, and I was returned to Ardmore Air Force Base. And at Ardmore Air Force Base, I at first was just the medical supply officer. But after about 6 months, I was chosen to be hospital administrator, plus my job I had about every job in the that a company officer had because I was the only company grade officer. And while there, my officer that was above me, Major Keys, recommended me to General Robert E. Lee, believe it or not, who was Surgeon General of Tactical Air Command. And General Robert E. Lee came to Ardmore Air Force Base for a hospital visit, and he called me in the office and asked me what I could do, or what he could do to keep me in the Air Force. And I said, I don't know. And I thought, I should have said, give me $1 million. But I didn't. And he offered me to go to, when you get older, you forget things, down to Houston, to the air base there, and get training in hospital administration, which I agreed to do. But in the meantime, I felt I could do better, although the major, who was my head officer above, told me after he retired in later years when I met him, he said, you have made a big mistake because you really would have moved up the ladder. But I chose to leave and went back to civilian life. I joined the reserves for a year and a half, but I left the reserves and my commission was still good for a total of 16 years. But after that, they asked me to either return or do reserves. And I said, no, I'll give up my commission. And I gave up my commission. But while I was in Korea, one of the Air Force officers, Korean Air Force officers, took me to the Air Force Academy, the South Korean Air Force Academy, and they fixed me a special meal because they knew I wouldn't want what they ate. So that was one of the, but on the way down there, he showed me where the 25 young American soldiers were executed. And then I visited the American and Turkish cemeteries in Korea. But the Air Force was a highlight and really a delight of my life. And I've never forgotten all the men I've met. The what's the word I want to use? The not companionship, but camaraderie of military service. We all cared for one another, and it'll always live in my heart.
If you had it to do over, would you do it again?
In today's military, I don't know.
Tell us a little bit about what you've done since then.
Since then, that's a story in itself. Okay, I went to, while at Ardmore Air Force Base,
Where is Ardmore Air Force Base? What state?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Yeah, it's not far from the Texas state line. And going down to Dallas, I decided I'm going to Dallas. That's where I'm going to live. And I did. I had a home built down there, and I lived down there 6 years. And I worked in all facets of pharmacy, hospital, retail, chain store, independent. I was a pharmaceutical salesman, and while I was a salesman, I called on a DO hospital, and they DO said, "Why don't you go to med school?" And I said, "Well, why not?" So, so I called on the main medical building downtown Dallas, where all the top doctors were. There were 400 there. And one of the doctors there said, "Oh, I can get you in the University of Texas." So he said, "I'm on the Board of Governors." So I interviewed for Texas, and they said if I would go back to college a year, they would let me attend. Well, I thought I didn't want to wait a year, so the DO intern said, "Go up to Kansas City to the DO college there." And I went up there, and they offered to let me attend there in September. I left Dallas in June, and I could have gone there in September. But I had to go to summer college, and get a course in physics, which I hadn't had. So I took the course in the summer, 10-hour course, went from mechanics to nuclear physics in 10 weeks, I think, and I flunked the course. I passed the lab because two girls helped me. Well, since I didn't do that, I decided, well, I like languages, and I had learned Japanese quite well. So I thought, well, I'll see what the university has, and I thought about learning German, but they had Russian, and I said, oh, that's a challenge. So I signed up, and for 2 years I studied Russian, and then I saw that Ohio State had a East European Slavic department. So I was accepted as a special student and special graduate student. And in the course of doing that, I did 5 years of Russian total, but I switched from there. But before I switched, 1 quarter we had to take 3 quarters of Russian, and we had class from 8 to 5, and we had to eat together, we had to speak Russian together, everything had to be Russian. If you passed that, you could study the next quarter in the Soviet Union. So I was able to go to the Soviet Union for about 3 months, and went to Leningrad to start with, and I met a couple there. He was Ukrainian, she was Russian Jew, and we became friends. And to skip ahead, in 1989, they came over here and visited me. But we ran around together, and while I was in Leningrad, and of course we toured. We were there 2 weeks, so we saw a lot, met a lot of people. We were allowed to meet, chosen by the government to meet. They were young people. Well, then we went to Moscow, and in Moscow, we were about 2 blocks from Red Square. I would go down to the hotel across from Red Square. On the 4th floor was a bar. And met a lot of foreigners up there. It was really great. And I became friends with the Ugandan national soccer team. And so my last night there, they had a party for me. And I met an Ethiopian student and a Ugandan student. And then that was my last night, but I didn't go to the bar until 12 o'clock midnight, because a Russian who had met me in a restaurant came up to me in a restaurant, asked me if I would bring some silver gifts back to relatives in Brooklyn. And I said, being American, I said, sure. Well, he was going to come the next night, and when he came, that day we had a message from the embassy. Do not take gifts out of the country or money out of the country. So when he came, he brought vodka. We drank vodka straight. It was very good vodka.
I bet it was.
Yeah. And
Those packages delivered.
and he left at midnight, and I told my roommate, "Oh, I'm going down to the other hotel," and that's when I went down there and had a few drinks with the Ugandan soccer players, and met other people too.
So
as
did you
I-
take his gifts?
As I left, pardon?
Did you take the gifts to deliver in the States?
No.
I wouldn't have either.
So I don't know if I was a setup or what it was.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know. Well, then I left the hotel at 4 a.m, and there was no one there on the street. I'm the only one on the street, and I'm walking down Gorky Street from Red Square to the hotel, and I kept looking around like this, you know, I didn't know. And then I had to go under a tunnel to the hotel. And I went to the hotel, and the door was locked. So I looked, I thought maybe there's a bell, and I rang the bell, and they came and let me in. And I had to go up to the second floor, upstairs, and there was a lady who had my key. She was sleeping. I had to wake her up to give me my key to get in my room, and then I had to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning to catch a bus to go to the airport to fly to Yalta. And we flew to Yalta, and we were there for a week. And I associated with all kinds of students there, Russian students, and went up to youth club and played ping pong, and I made a friend from Kiev, which they don't pronounce it right, they call it Kiev, but it's Kiev. And he and I ran around for a week, and he took me to meet other friends of his, and it was really great. Well, we were taken out to a youth camp 8 miles from Yalta, and we were the only Western students there, and there were students from Europe, East Europe, communist countries, and we just had a great time with them. And people are going to think I'm a drunkard, but I haven't been drinking. We met, and first we were drinking wine, and we were talking. About 6 o'clock, they said, "It's time to go. The bus is here." And the Russian guys and they were Ukrainian actually there at that time. And we said, "We don't want to go yet." And they said, "Well, you have another hour, but when we come back, you got to go." Well, that was about 11 o'clock when they came back. And I sat next to a fellow that we kind of became friends. And later, I'm getting off the track a little bit, but later this roommate of mine was a teacher from Chicago who taught Russian and Latin. And he went back with students, went to the hotel in Yalta where we stayed, and this fellow was the bartender. And he sent me a note back, and he said, "If you ever get back here, be sure and come and see me." Russian people are nice. I mean, I don't have anything against the people. They like Americans, and I can tell you they are good people, the citizens themselves. I got to stop that. So I did it again. I'm trying to think. From there, we
Tell us
went.
some of the things you were telling me earlier that you do now at 93. I was impressed.
Oh, well, I wasn't 93 then.
Yeah.
That was back in 1967.
I know, but I'm saying you told us up front a while ago some things that you still do. Raking hay and
Yeah,
working on your remodeling your house,
bush hogging,
bush
mowing
hogging,
lawn.
yard mowing.
And I bought myself a new tractor last year.
Yeah.
Now I have air conditioning and heat.
That's good. Where did you grow up?
Wisconsin, for 8 years. My dad was a minister, and then he was transferred to Brooklyn, New York. We were there 2 years, and I was grateful to leave.
What led you here?
Then from Brooklyn, we went to Middletown, Ohio, from there to Cincinnati, Ohio. That's how I happened to go to the University of Cincinnati. And now where was I? I was in Yalta.
What brought you to Fayetteville?
I was living in Florida, and my brother passed away, and I had no family. And most of my friends at that point had signed out. And so I really didn't want to be alone, and I had known Gary. So his wife had passed away in 2 years before my brother, and he was here in Fayetteville farming by himself, and we chatted on the phone. And he said, well, why don't you come up here? So for about a year, I thought, well, I'm in my 80s. Do I want to pack up and move? And I'd have to find doctors and all that. So I came up.
How'd you meet Gary?
Oh, I knew Gary from a long time ago by virtue of knowing the father of someone I was at Montgomery with in the military. And it was a baseball thing. He played baseball, and this guy's son played baseball. And one time I went down there, and they were having a tournament, and Gary was, that's how I met him.
Very good.
That is a very
Yeah, it was ironic that I was in Montgomery.
That's wonderful.
And, yeah.
Wow. Thank you
But,
for being here, Mr. Frank, and thank you for sharing your story with us because
Well, you're
it's
welcome.
awesome. It is
Yeah.
truly awesome.
Yeah, I did go back to Russia in '88 on a pharmacy tour and traveled to Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan.
So you were you've been a pharmacist for, that was your working career.
Yeah, I worked as a pharmacist 52 years.
He owned his own.
I started filling the prescriptions because when I was in high school in '46, they didn't have all these pills. They just had, like sulfa and penicillin and Benadryl, and that was not much more, maybe sleeping pills. But we made everything, and when I was in high school, they were teaching me how to make stuff. So when I got out of high school, I went to work for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad in the freight office because my parents were friends of people who were big shots at the Virginia. And they wrote to him and said, can you find him a job? And they found me a job. But I got the job in July, and in December I got laid off. 1,000 people got laid off, and I was at the bottom of the list. So that's how I ended up going to pharmacy college.
Sounds like it was a good move.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Gary said he owned his own pharmacy.
Oh, owned your own pharmacy.
And that's interesting that back in 52, there were very few drugs. Amazing.
Yeah. We made everything. Eye drops, ear drops, suppositories, powders, capsules, you name it. It was all made. But they don't have time to do that today.
No, not with as many people on.
So I've seen the whole change through
Yes.
pharmacy that's taken place. But I wanted to tell you one other thing. My brother was going to have to go in the service. So I said, go in the Air Force. So he joined the Air Force. And guess who had to swear him into the Air Force?
You.
I did.
Now that's pretty good.
Yes. Yeah.
We're thankful that you made it to Lincoln County. And thanks to
It's
Gary
been
for bringing
interesting.
you today and for being your friend.
Well, when I was in Ohio and went to Ohio State, I ended up buying a farm. And I raised sheep and had chickens and a goat and still worked in pharmacy. And then I eventually opened my own pharmacy in DeGraff, Ohio, a small country town.
You've seen the world. Thank you for your
Yeah.
service.
Yeah.
You have.
Yeah,
Thank you for your service.
yeah.
Thank you for the interview
Well,
today.
You're welcome, and it's a pleasure to have done it. I hope whoever sees it finds it interesting.
They will.
Thank you.
Thank you.